No, you look great. Everything's great. Where you located?
I'm in New York.
New York. Cool. Very good.
Yeah.
My dad was born in Brooklyn and raised in Long Island.
Oh, no way.
So,
All right.
yeah.
Neighbors.
Yeah. So yeah, there's a connection for sure. Well, you got a lot going on in your world, and I'm looking forward to getting into it. So I'd like to begin our journey and conversation with 4 years ago, especially in New York, COVID took hold and no one knew where it was going to go. Now that we're kind of in this era where we're coming out of it, how did you survive the COVID period and how did it change you?
So it was quite a extraordinary experience because it really, well, for all of us, right? It came out of absolutely nowhere.
Yeah.
And I think we were all completely in denial about it. And then, like a few days later, we were in lockdown and, we were at the epicenter of the pandemic and everybody was at home. And then I'm a doctor and my office everybody got closed out. It wouldn't have mattered even if we did stay open because nobody wanted to come out and see us anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. Let's get to the heart and soul of all of the titles that you have. I want to find out what you do in 2024. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of third graders at career day. And one of the kids says, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" How do you answer that child?
Third grade.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm a doctor and I do lots of different types of medicine. So, there's Western medicine, and then there's all the medicines that you may have not really heard about that represent different cultures. Like China has its own medicine, which is broadly known as Chinese medicine. So I've studied that too, which includes acupuncture, which is poking a bunch of needles into people's bodies to try to find balance. And it help, that sounds kind of strange that you might stick a needle in somebody's body to help them to regain balance, because that probably sounds pretty counterintuitive, but that's actually what it does. And in China, before the drug era, before drugs, pharmaceuticals were created, they used natural medicine from plants, because most medication, not most, lots of medication was actually derived from plants. And so Chinese medicine is about the original medicine, which comes from the plants. So I do that. I also do psychotherapy, like counseling. It's kind of a little bit like just talk therapy. Somatic medicine, meaning the understanding that the body is a reflection of illness, and that we can actually carry a lot of psychological emotional imbalances actually inside the body, like when you're like super anxious about something and your stomach doesn't feel good, or if you're stressed out and you have a really bad headache. So it's an extension of that. So I look at the body and how it responds to illness.
So what did you want to be in the third grade? What was your dream?
I wanted to be a hairdresser.
Okay. Okay. So
Yeah.
how did medicine become your life?
um so I grew up in Australia, and Australia is very, very progressive about careers. And so this is in the 80s when I was going through high school. And in Australia, they asked us at a very young age, so what do you want to do when you finish high school? And so we were all chatting and talking about it. And when I was 14 years old, I met an old alternative medical doctor for the first time. And I thought, oh, wow, this is really cool. So I pretty much at 14, I had already decided that that's what I wanted to do. Well, I wanted to go into the medical field in general.
Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. So how did you start? Did you go to school? How did all of it kind of progress and evolve into where you're at today?
So I went to medical school in Shanghai because that was the only place back then that had an integrative. Actually, I think it's probably the only place, that still has an integrative degree in Chinese medicine, like pharmaceuticals as well as Chinese herbal medicine. So that's my
Yeah.
degree. And so I went to Shanghai because they in Australia they didn't offer a program like that. And actually in the US they don't offer it either. So I ended up going to Shanghai. I got my undergraduate degree in Chinese language and cultural studies, and then I went off to medical school after that. It's kind of a strange segue, but I had to learn Chinese language because I didn't speak any Chinese at all.
Yeah.
My ancestors are Japanese, so there's not much overlap between the languages other than the characters. I ended up in China for under a decade, and then I ended up in California where I actually studied acupuncture there.
Okay.
And then I studied psychology in California as well. And then I moved out to New York and started my practice here.
Okay.
And at some point decided I wanted to study functional medicine as well. That's all that fancy lab testing
Sure.
stuff.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
who's been a hero for you? Who's been kind of an inspiration for you in your life?
Who's been a hero? I think I think mostly my mom. I know that sounds so corny, but I think
No.
she really, you know, I think she probably was my biggest inspiration. She's the one that I really got into all of this in the first place because she was quite ill when I was young, and I always wanted to help her and make her feel better. You know, when I was a kid, I used to braid her hair, and that was my way of like trying to help her.
Yeah.
And that it kind of evolved from there, I think. And then just
Yeah.
my interest in illness and health and healing in general.
How do you keep all of that straight? You're dealing with a lot, whether you're in talk therapy or you're dealing with people that have issues. There's a lot of heavy that goes into that. How do you maintain that balance between taking care of yourself and then ultimately taking care of others that need your help?
It's, I think, really tricky, especially when you're doing this kind of, you could call it energy medicine, right? Because a lot of it's hands-on, especially if you're doing energy medicine, acupuncture, your hands are literally on somebody's physical body, and there's a lot of exchange of energy that happens at that time, and that is actually very difficult to deal with because if somebody's feeling upset, then you're going to be feeling upset with them.
Yeah.
So when I first started practicing, it was really challenging to learn how to process somebody's energy. It took me an hour sometimes between patients to let go of that person's energy before I could work on the next person, because then I was like completely out of sorts.
Yeah.
And because I was always tended to work on people with quite intense trauma,
Yeah.
and if they'd been assaulted or they'd been through something really extreme, they were often emoting quite a lot in the session. So that was very, very difficult for me to learn how to balance all of that. And so obviously when I first started, I didn't have a lot of patience.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot more free time that I had to be able to calibrate myself between patients. But at this point, like I'm actually like 25 years into my practice at this point. So it's much more automatic. Like it just kind of washes off much more quickly, and by
Yeah.
the time that the patient's left, it's already pretty much cleared. Once in a while though, something gets to me, if hear a story that I had a patient not so long ago who was held up at gunpoint. That was kind of intense for me, like listening to
Yeah.
that took me a few days to clear that.
Wow.
So stuff like that does happen even to me now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you are you an empath?
I guess I guess maybe. I don't know.
Technically?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't even know. Yes, I hope so.
Yeah, right. Right, right. Which my wife's an empath and things will affect her in ways that she just can't regulate. So it's a, I can see that it would take some time to kind of get all of that away so that you're clear for somebody else.
Yes, yeah, it's tricky. And when I used to teach people who were highly sensitive as well, that wasn't, because you don't really learn that at school.
Right.
It's something that you have to figure out yourself. It's like life skills.
Yeah.
Like, when you go through, high school, you would hope that people had a little bit more education in how to emotionally regulate themselves, right? But they don't. You learn algebra.
Mhm.
It hasn't been that helpful for my life.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. Oh
Exactly.
well.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. If you can meet one person alive on the planet right now that you find fascinating or interesting, who would it be? Who would you love to meet and talk to?
um, Other than my mother who passed away, that's a really good question. There's this book that I'm reading right now on getting inside. I think it's called Inside the Criminal's Mind.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. It was written a while ago, and I'm so sorry I can't remember the author's name. But it's about understanding the criminal mindset, and I'd love to pick his brain a little bit.
So along those lines, I got a suggestion for you. I listened to a podcast a little while back and it was called The Apology Line. And it was set up in New York in the 80s. And it was a guy that was an artist that set up this experimental thing where he would put a phone number on a pole, and you could anonymously call in and apologize for anything you've done in your
Oh my
life.
god, that's
Okay.
amazing.
So it turned into this big, huge thing that became people confessing things, and it got real heavy. And this guy was like, whoa, I didn't see this. So if you want to hear something really interesting, like with this book, like getting into the mindset of
Yeah.
how this kind of art house experiment kind of grew legs and ran into this realm that was unexpected. So it's called The Apology Line. So,
Well, that's great. Oh, that's amazing. Actually, I actually thought about another person whose name I can't think of, but I'm sure you probably heard of them. It's like two politicians. They're a husband and a wife, and they're politicians, but they represent different parties. And I
oh, yeah.
would, you
Kelly
know
Way
them, but
Conway and George Conway.
yeah, I'd
Yeah.
like to get to know how I would love to know how they get along.
There was
I'm
another
interested.
Yeah, there was another guy that did the same thing. He was aligned with Clinton, Carville. Carville, I can't remember. Anyway, Carville, he's always on he's a pundit on all of these political shows, but he's married to a conservative, so they kind of have to do the same thing, which is wild. How they
Yeah,
maintain that balance.
yeah, absolutely. Because I think that it would help our world a lot to have to understand how people get along,
Yeah,
with different views. Because I think that's so important to understand how to be able to when you don't agree with somebody, how can you still care about them?
that's what I think is so hopeful about podcasting. There's a level of it that's modern therapy. There's this civility, there's this celebration of people and what they're doing. There's just this overall kind of fascination, and we satiate that curiosity by finding out what everybody's doing. And what I realize is that we're all much more alike than we are not. I think the media has drawn this chasm between us that doesn't exist. I think we're all much more aligned to wanting some of the same things in this reality.
I do think so too, and it's unfortunate that it's become so polarized. Because I like to read things from different points of view, and it's almost like we're living in two different countries
Yeah.
when I read different opinions. It's fascinating.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild for sure. So let me ask you this. What is the motivator for you every day to get up to do the work that you do? Because you're not just going to a job. You have to give a lot of yourself, but you also have to evolve as a human. What is that motivation and spark for you?
I think most of it's just because I really enjoy what I do.
Yeah.
I I really love the people that I work with, the patients. It gives me tremendous joy to see people get better, to watch people go from a dark place into lightness. I think that that in itself is very rewarding for me, that I am able to witness that. Hopefully, I'm having some kind of positive impact on their life too. But just even watching somebody go through that remarkable journey is very special, and to be able to see it,
Yeah.
up close.
Yeah. So in this life of navigating and finding your way, and you've done a lot in your life, what's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Probably for my dad when he said, uh, "Don't basically don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's never really a mistake if you learn something from it." That
Well
was his
said.
last words that he
Wow.
said to me before he passed away.
That's deep. That's really deep.
Hmm.
So let me ask you this. Of all of the clients that you've helped, all the patients you've had, and I know it has to be anonymous, I'm curious, what's one of your favorite success stories?
Um, I think that anybody who's overcome significant trauma, is there's many of them, but I I think that they're all very successful in my opinion, because anybody that's overcome anything difficult, it's hard to kind of compare. But anybody who's gone through severe family trauma and then is able to overcome that and then have a fulfilling relationship. Like if you've been in a very abusive family environment, it's most people shut down. Some people unfortunately recreate similar types of relationships, or they just really struggle in life in general when there's that much family trauma and abuse. And those people who work all through all of that, all those challenges, and come out the other side being balanced people, able to get married and have children if they want to. I think that's remarkable that they're able to do that and be balanced people, enjoy life. I
Yeah.
think, yeah, that's, and I don't see that that often, and that takes so much time to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, you ran into a younger version of you, an 18-year-old version, you could give that young version of you a piece of advice based on the life you've led, the wisdom you've gained along the way. What advice would you impart? And would that version of you listen?
I don't think that person would listen, actually,
Right.
but I would still tell myself that because one of the things that why I started doing podcasts and why I started writing is because I realized that I was too shy and I wanted to share my story a little bit more. And I wish I'd put myself out there a little bit. Like I
Yeah.
felt, I think I've spent the majority of my young adult life hiding,
Yeah.
and obviously not in a in an office or anything like
Sure.
that, but just I wish I had put myself out there. Like I wanted to be a dancer for a long time, and I was always in the back corner hiding, and that was fine, it's fine, but there's a part of me, I would tell my 18-year-old self, like, you know just
Yeah.
put yourself out there and
Yeah.
just see. It doesn't matter if you fail,
Yeah.
just put yourself out there more.
Just do it. It's
Yeah.
hard with youth though, because we have it all figured out then, you know? There's a level of us that has it all figured out. So I'm curious as a writer, what's your what was one of the your favorite books growing up? What was one of the seminal books?
My favorite book. Oh, there's so many of them. Mm, it's totally, I'm sorry, I'm like totally spacing out. It's like a spiritual book
Okay.
about a man who takes this journey. I'm like totally
Oh,
spacing
The
out.
Prophet? Yeah.
That was probably one of my favorites
Yeah.
as a um an older child, a
Yeah.
young adult, maybe a young. Um, oh, I'm sorry. I'm totally spacing
You're
out right
fine.
now.
No, that's good. No, that's totally fine. So I'm curious, speaking of overcoming and getting to better places in our lives and all the things that we do as humans, at this point in your life, what are you the proudest of?
About what I overcame.
Well, no, just more specifically, whether no matter what it is, what are you the proudest of at this point in your life that you've become or that you've done?
Oh, I think probably having the guts to actually publish my first book. I think because I almost died, and that's the reason why I wrote that book. And it really took something like death to shake me up a little bit and decide, okay, look, life is kind of short, and I almost died. So there's not that much left, maybe in this life. I might as well do it. And I am proud of myself because that book's embarrassing. Like I put my, it's very it was embarrassing. It's like my weakest points, and it's very vulnerable. It's
But
funny, but it's
but that's the way it is though when you really put it out there. It's I think there's going to be that spectrum of emotion that goes into it when you put yourself out online because otherwise it's not going to be appealing to people. I mean to a certain degree they want the real deal,
yes,
you know? So
yes.
did you see the light? Did you see anything getting to a near death experience? Was there anything seminal about that?
No, I was on the um the cusp of having an anaphylactic reaction, and I was
Okay.
teetering on that for quite some time, for maybe a few days, I think maybe 3 days or so. And so it was basically something go wrong and I could die or not. And it was just being in that state for quite a long period of time.
Yeah.
And I decided to starve myself, because if I didn't eat or put minimal things into my body, then I was less likely to have a anaphylactic reaction.
I gotcha.
So yeah,
Okay. Has that experience, the near death experience, made you say yes to things more, doing more things?
I think so. I
Yeah.
think that really did. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that in the past I'd had experiences, from my illness, where I was knocked out unconscious, having seizures and all that kind of stuff too. And but the problem was, in the past I was too sick to really put myself out there. And as I've gotten healthier, I think I've had more energy to devote to my personal projects.
Okay.
So that's
So
the difference now. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So I'm curious, at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you. Family, friends, your readers, your patients, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I think of myself as somebody who likes to make people laugh. That's, I'm like a jokester. If I could play little pranks on people every day and get away with it, I would.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. So if anyone wants to pick up your book, they want to learn more about you, reach out, any of the good business, where do they go?
So momokowrites.com is my writing website. And for the medical stuff, it's omniwellnessnyc.com. That's
Okay.
got more my bio stuff on it.
Okay. This has been great. Thank you. It's so great to meet you. I appreciate your story. Keep doing the great work. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. It was great chatting with you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Take care.